The sixth Brics Summit starts in Brazil tomorrow. South Africa will be giving up its chairmanship to the host. The five member countries will also put the final touches to the new development bank. This is said to be an alternative to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Well, to discuss this further, we join now in the studio by Ian Cruikshanks, Chief Economist at the South African Institute of Race Relations. Ian, thank you very much for coming in.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Well, South Africa took over the chairmanship in Durban last year,
Yes.
if I'm correct. How do you think we've done in the past year as South Africa chairing this important economic grouping?
I'd say we rate a pass. Not an extraordinary one, no distinctions in this result, I'm afraid. But then, of course, we've got to see what we're up against. We're up against an economy, a world economy, which didn't really get going. A South African economy, which has really been rather in the doldrums and has been beset by labour problems and all sorts of other challenges, strikes, and that has made it very difficult for South Africa to lead from the front.
And in leading from the front, South Africa has set itself a task to make sure that through its membership of Brics, the rest of the continent can benefit. And some of the African economies, including around us like Angola, Mozambique, were growing at much higher rates than our own.
Indeed. And this has been a problem, not an unsurmountable problem, but I think it was South Africa did bring attention, world attention, to the fact that the next great frontier, the exploration of resources and development, whether it's in precious minerals or it's in oil or gas, a lot of these are sourced around Africa. And South Africa is the natural gateway. And I think that they have emphasized that. They've made it clear we have the ability in dealing in African problems with Africans. We've got the capital, we've got the know-how, and this has, I think, permeated through to the Brics group and into broader groups as well.
One of the key focus subtopics for this summit in Brazil is the setting up of this new development bank.
Right.
We know there's been a lot of discussions over the last 2 years, if not more, around how it's going to be structured, who's going to contribute what, and finally the member countries have agreed that the first capital will be equally donated or contributed into starting this bank. But where do you think it's going to be headquartered? I know the Chinese want it in Shanghai. We want it in South Africa.
Well, of course, we feel that we have a moral advantage because we're saying that a large part of this 100 billion, which is the initial startup capital, could be channeled into Africa, into the development of the continent's resources. So therefore, it would be logical to have it in South Africa because we're the only representative of the continent in the Brics group. On the other hand, if we have to look at the size of our economy, it is less than half of the next biggest one. So, you know, definitely the small player on this field.
We are punching well below our weight there, and we're only going to be contributing about 5 billion startup.
We're punching well above our weight.
Well above our weight.
Yes, because we're saying we're the leaders, we're the strongest. We're not, as I said, economically less powerful than the others.
Is it a good thing for the Brics countries to set up a development bank? I mean, you've got the World Bank, you've got the IMF, and they've been helping emerging economies with infrastructure development capital.
Sure. Well, I think the Brics group are going to concentrate firstly on their own membership, and that's very important from our point of view, and also on developing economies rather than developed economies. And maybe that is where I think the group will have more of an advantage.
Yeah, shouldn't they be focusing on how we can get positive growth of the economies going in some of the Brics members, like South Africa, for instance?
Yes, certainly that deserves a lot of attention. But we have to remember that we are very much tied to the world economy. We need an upturn in the US and Europe and China, particularly because so many of our exports go to China. And until they really take off in economic activity, it's going to be difficult for South Africa to really, and the other Brics group countries, to really get their economies going at a significant rate. So we are dependent on the world economy at the moment, which is really going ahead at a relatively slow rate.
As an economist, how would you regard success for the Brazil Brics Summit?
I would say that if Brazil are able to take the group forward, to get more attention to the group, to have them more accepted as a leadership group, I think that is really what's counted, and for their own economies to develop in a faster rate. Because don't forget, Brazil itself has been its growth rate has pulled back considerably. Same problems as we've got, consumer apathy, consumer nervousness, business nervousness, a slowdown in activity, and they're just not growing. They're not getting the new investment and the new growth to the extent that they thought they would. And I think that the plan of the political leadership hasn't come to fruition the way they had hoped. Nevertheless, it's a much bigger economy than South Africa, and hopefully they'll be able to leverage on that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's Ian Cruikshanks, Chief Economist at the South African Institute of Race Relations, discussing the Brics Summit that's starting in Brazil tomorrow.
You deserve to know more.
ENCA.com